Welcome to a very special episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. Oh, today I'm so excited because I'm going to be talking to my dear friend, entrepreneur, best-selling author, podcaster, a woman with so many brilliant competencies, mother, Kate Northrup. Kate's goal is to support ambitious women to light up the world without burning themselves out. She truly believes that when women heal their relationships with money, they can step into their true power to feel the way they want to feel, live the way they want to live, and have a positive impact on the world. Kate is one of my mentors. She inspires me every single day. She's just awesome. You are going to love this interview. Joining me now is my dear friend, best-selling author, mom, entrepreneur, and host of the Plenty podcast, Make a Life, Not Just a Living, Kate Northrup. Welcome to my podcast. I never thought I'd be saying these words to you because you're such a podcast veteran, but finally I have the honor of having you on my podcast. It means so much to me. I wrote the foreword of your book, Do Less. I loved that book so much. And now you're teaching so many mothers and women out there to claim their financial truth, their autonomy, their sovereignty. But before we get into what you do, Kate, tell us, where are you in your life as a mom right now? I know you have two daughters. Tell us a little bit about your mommyhood journey up till now.
So I have two little girls. One is almost 7 and one is 9. So we're in the elementary years.
What has been your biggest curveball, your biggest pain point? And you don't have to find the biggest one. It could be a series of many, but what would you say has been some of the hardest lessons in motherhood for you?
My first daughter, her birth was really traumatic and she was born sick. And, she had to be resuscitated when she was born. And so she's had an ongoing journey of health issues. And one of the things that it manifests as, now that she's 9, it is a lot easier. But since she was about 3, first of all, it was like the most unbelievable eczema you can imagine. Like she would wake herself up scratching and screaming and bloody like every 10 minutes when she was an infant. So that was brutal. Then it the skin has been a whole thing, but it manifested. We got some work back from like a mycology test and some toxin work that we were doing. And basically the people we were working with were like, wow, these numbers would indicate her levels are so over the top with mold and other toxins. We would expect severe behavioral issues with a child like this, because when it's showing up this way, it feels like their brain is on fire. And we do not have severe behavioral issues with my daughter. I'm very grateful for that. However, every now and again, and it is lessening as she gets older, but starting when she was about at the age of 3, when her dad also got really sick, she started having these unbelievable emotional outbursts that sometimes would last for 3 hours, with her screaming the same word over and over and over again, and like so severely dysregulated, like she was taken over by a poltergeist. Like navigating that and staying present and being a safe person for her has continued to be one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Wow, Kate. Oh, all of us have these pain points as parents. And everyone projects onto other parents like, oh, she couldn't be going through anything. Her life looks perfect. I'm sure you get a lot of that projection. I know I do. And then when we're in it, we think it's only happening to us. Did you feel like that when you were going through that?
Yes. And in fact, I just messaged a girlfriend. Her daughter, for whatever reason, has some similar things that happened. They were born within a few weeks of each other and we were pregnant together. And I messaged her because she was having a thing going on. And I was just like, I just want you to know, you're messaging me about repair and possibilities and whatever. And did you do okay in that moment? And I was like, I just want you to know, just this past Sunday, this was happening to us and it was this long. And it was like, and I was like, so I just need you to know you are not the only one. I know that we can always take responsibility for our own contribution, but at the same time, like there is this feeling of like, am I the worst mother ever? Like, how is this possible? And so I always try to share with my friends when they're going through this, like, whatever version. Hey, over here also, here's what's going on, just to diffuse that myth like, A, I'm alone, or B, I'm the worst ever.
100%. My daughter is 22 and I go through that. Like, why is this happening to me? How could I have messed up so much? And I think part of it, Kate, is that we are such successful, competent, overachieving, lovely people, even though I'll add that in, that we can't imagine doing anything wrong. And so we over personalize it. I think we take on, so the child could just be having a hard time, like all children do. But I think women, especially, and those like us, we take it on as if it's our responsibility. We must have done something wrong. We should do something better. And I think we trap ourselves with this overthinking.
Well, and as I'm listening to you describe it, I'm also like, gosh, it's also pretty self-absorbed.
Yes.
Like quite frankly, is that helping in the moment, certainly, and even in around it? Is that helping my child? Am I being the most supportive space I could possibly be for her development if I am simultaneously being like, what's wrong with me that this would happen? Because then also in the field is shame.
Yes.
And then in the field is possibly my child then picking up on that, like, oh, if my mother's thinking, what's wrong with me? How did I get this created? Then my child is going to be receiving, well, if my mother's feeling shame and guilt about this, then there must be something very wrong with me as well.
100%. And sooner or later, that inner critic that doesn't stop, that's unrelenting, that has actually helped us be successful, but it has this shadow.
Yes.
Will eventually create resentment within us, which is then going to be translated as shame. So how do we stop that inner critic in the midst of this turmoil? Our child is going berserk. They're having this huge tantrum, but our inner critic is going berserk too. And it's so hard to just stay neutral and present. So difficult, so difficult. But I think the answer doesn't even need to be found. I think the answer is in the acknowledgement of how hard it is. And I think, when women, if they look up Kate Northrup, they're going to see this unbelievably luminescent, successful, brilliant person and never imagine that she too, like them, like all of us, has human moments. And I love that about this conversation. We got straight into it. So on your website, you actually have put right there up front, you write, when my family's world got turned upside down and inside out in 2021, I faced a tough reckoning. And you talk about your husband's illness, his car accident, and how you felt a lot of pressure to hold all the responsibility as a mother of two young children. So can you take us through that journey a little bit?
Yeah. So 2021, my husband had his second bout with something. If you look it up, it's called like red man syndrome or topical steroid withdrawal. But I think underneath the surface was just like severe toxicity and quite frankly, his own spiritual awakening, which he could tell the story on that, which in the end, like was really a blessing for all of us. However, in the moment, he lost 40 pounds in 1 month. He could not work. His skin was so inflamed and essentially peeling off over and over again. I won't get into the details. It was so gory and so awful. And my husband's my business partner. So not only was it like, okay, now we're one man down from a parenting perspective, we were one man down from a business, earning perspective. And there was no like clear diagnosis. There was no clear plan of treatment. And so we were in this complete unknown of like, he's so sick and we have no idea how to help and we have no idea how long it's going to be. And so it just felt like, okay, we live here now. This is our life. We moved to Miami unexpectedly so that it would help him heal because the team he did find, who ended up being amazing, said if he would stay where it was warm and humid, it would really help because we were living in a small town in Maine at the time and it was winter. And it was like, that is not the vibe when you have a severe skin issue. So we came to Miami and suddenly overnight we were not only paying for our previous life in Maine, we were also now paying for this second life in one of the most expensive cities in the United States and private school and all of this stuff. Simultaneously, it was the pandemic, so that was affecting everybody. And then also my mom was sort of being deplatformed and canceled at the same time. And a lot of people were holding me responsible for her choices about what she was saying. So it was like a lot of layers. It was really, really difficult because I was in this loop of like, if Mike could just be healthy and if he could just make a bunch of money, I would then get the permission finally to exhale and relax. But until that happens, I just have to hold everything together and essentially like grip. My whole being was just gripping. And our girls were at the time 2.5 and 5, just kind of like for that. Yeah. And we were away from family. And our therapist had me close my eyes and he said, okay, now I want you to imagine that Mike has just come home and said, okay, babe, I've just made $10 million. So for the foreseeable future, like you don't need to do anything. And David said, what are you feeling? Like, what are you noticing? And what was so shocking to me is that my response that I was feeling in my body was like kind of depression, flatlined, and like I was dead inside. So what I realized was that I was using my addiction to financial stress and pressure as the primary stimulant to run my life. And I was using that as my fuel source. And I didn't even know who I would be without that identity of doer, of like, oh, the woman who can pull it out of the bag at the last minute and like, ta-da, look what I did against all odds.
Right.
And so at the time, I also had gotten some blood work done. And my doctor said, okay, so basically your brakes are broken and so is your gas. So if you keep operating in the way you're operating, you're going to become very ill. And the thing is, when there's one parent who's already sick, a doctor saying that is very serious. And I was like, my girls will have no one to take care of them if I go down too. So I better change the way I am operating. So for 90 days, I did an experiment. And the experiment was, I'm just going to run the business like in coast mode, meaning I'm only going to deliver the things we've already promised, but I am not allowed to use my ramp up gripping energy to create any new campaigns, any new offers, any new anything. And every time I feel like I'm panicked, I'm going to run this email campaign. We're going to do this. We're going to add an offer over here. Like anytime I do that, I am only allowed to do one of the following things: go into the closet and scream into a pillow, call a girlfriend and cry, watch daytime television, go for a walk, or go sit by the ocean and listen to what she wants to tell me. So that was my menu. And so for 90 days, I just practiced doing a new behavior every time I felt anxious and panicked. And what was so amazing is that after 90 days, we hit all our financial goals. And my blood work worked itself out. And I now had a living example that I had just experienced, that stress and pressure were not required in order for me to hit my financial goals and do what I needed to do. And it felt really important for my kids to begin to experience a mom who could actually relax.
Oh my goodness. And wasn't your second book called Relax Money?
So the thing is, my second book was called Do Less. And that's what's
Oh, that's the
embarrassing
second
about
book.
the whole.
Okay.
But I'm working on a new book that will really be more about this piece around money and the nervous system. And that is the work I'm doing now. But I don't know, Shefali, if you've ever found this, but I'm like, oh man, I did write a book called Do Less, and here I am 2 years later, still learning those same freaking lessons.
And now you're teaching courses, you're helping women around this idea of relaxed money, right? Like, how do you attract money from a relaxed internal equilibrium rather than this hustle culture of stress, right?
Exactly. And it's rooted in the work that I began to do at that time, which was nervous system healing work. Because as much as I love mindset work and addressing our thoughts and beliefs, for me, I needed a physiological experience to be able to build my capacity to actually experience something new and to switch my fuel source from stress and pressure to actually like what might it be like if I ran my life from life force
Yeah.
that didn't require me to feel like there was an emergency. And that because of the environment I was raised in, it required some updating of my nervous system thermostat to feel safe with stability.
This is such a great conversation, Kate. Thank you so much. But let's take a quick break and we'll be back for more. So, Kate, in the spirit of conscious parenting, and you know so much about my work, you were raised within a system where I know your mother's, persona out in the world is quite public. She's quite a force. She's so, out there and so acclaimed. How was it as a young girl to grow up in her wings or her shadow? And I don't know which it was for you, but how was that experience to grow up with such a formidable mother figure?
Man, such a blessing on some level, right? Because, and everything's twofold always, but I will say, like, my mom is so courageous. She's such a pioneer. She's such a trailblazer. And so I had, when I talked to some of my girlfriends who have big careers, it's a block for them because many of them had moms who were stay-at-home moms. And so they're constantly in this pull of like, do I get to go big in my work and also mother at the same time? I'm very grateful that because I was raised by a mom out there doing things, I don't have the same friction that they have because she just was the example. So I was just like, great, here we are. At the same time, one of my biggest woundings was around her like not being around because at the time, like she didn't have what I have, which is the internet.
Right,
Right? Like I can be here with you right now, and then I'm going to pick my kids up from school.
right.
So she, in order to have the big career, she really did need to be on airplanes a lot and like out a lot. And it was really heartbreaking for me as a kid. And one of the reasons that I even started a business was because I knew I wanted to be a present mom who was able to pick my kids up from school, not every day, but like when I want to, and be able to volunteer in their classrooms and really like be fully there in the way that makes sense for us. But I also am super aware that like without women like my mom, my generation wouldn't be able to be doing what we're doing. So as much as it's been part of my heartbreak, I'm also like so grateful and so proud of her.
I know it's such a double-edged sword. She didn't have the luxuries. We can kind of, like you said, have full careers globally, but never leave our home. So, but let's talk about that as a little girl.
Yeah.
What was that heartbreak? How did you interpret her not being there? Did you internalize it as you're not good enough?
I just really wanted her to stay home. Like I would throw myself at her feet and beg her to not go. I mean, every single time she went. And I just think like, oh God, how brutal for her. But what did I interpret it as? It's like hard for me to, okay, so what was the interpretation?
I mean, as a child, I don't think we are cognizant of an interpretation.
I think as a child, I probably told the story like I wasn't good enough, or if I could be more, do more. To be perfectly honest, Shefali, I think I told that story more about my dad.
Why do you think it was more for your dad?
He was more into like achievement and ambition of the traditional sense and like really held me and my sister to a very high academic standard. I think I just was like really wanting to make him proud and get his acknowledgement, like, hello. And so there was more, I think, that with him.
Yeah. Yeah. So, given that you remember these woundings, these moments of pain, and you resolve to be a different mom with your children. So, one way you were different is that you tried to be more physically and emotionally present, which you've succeeded. But then talk about how, in terms of grade and achievement, because you have achieved a lot. So, now how do you pass on that legacy to your children without overburdening them?
I think about this all the time. Okay, so both my sister and I went to Ivy League colleges, and I'm so grateful for my education. I really am. And I cannot say that the success I've achieved in my career is directly related to all the academic pushing that I did and that was foisted upon me. So with my girls, like even when my daughter was in kindergarten, she was at this school that started doing this take home, like home. It wasn't like called homework, but it was like, at home learning or whatever. And I went into the teacher and I was like, listen, I have some academic trauma and I'm really unavailable to be guiding my daughter, who is 5 and 6, that year, in anything at home other than being available for her to play. So just so you know, we're not doing this. And she was like, great, thanks for letting me know. Cause I
Right.
just knew, like, I just knew. And now we're moving. And one of the things that happens is like, we're looking at all these private schools and they have the freaking ticker tape at the bottom of like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, like showcasing where the kids all got into. And as soon as I go to a school website that has that, I'm like, this is not the place for us because that focus. I just think, first of all, higher education needs a full redo, reboot. And like, absolutely, if my kids want to become doctors or architects or, astrophysicists, like, I'm going to support their education, but I'm so much more invested in like, do they love themselves? Can they play well with others? Are they able to learn how to regulate themselves? Are they outside? Are they physically healthy? Are they moving their bodies? Is their curiosity being supported? And the way academics are structured is such a ridiculously narrow band of the human experience that just keeps getting replicated as like some ridiculous ideal that to me has not directly resulted in any of the most meaningful things in my life other than like a few best friends that I have from college, which I'm so grateful for. Right.
Well,
But like, did I need to go to that school
right.
and get straight A's my whole life and feel all this stress about it in order to have those friendships? No, I did not. And so as a mom, like this is a huge piece for me. And again, like my kids are only 7 and 9, so we'll see. But we have chosen some very unusual educational paths as a result.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you felt empowered to go to the teacher and tell her, especially because you're paying for a private school education. You're like, you're not going to pay me to be miserable. And I'm not going to pay you to make me miserable, is what I meant. So you had the guts and the audacity and the courage and the creativity to take charge of this conversation with your teacher and change the course. Most parents, because they have school trauma themselves from being outside the principal's office or being reprimanded and their own parents yelling at them, I literally coach parents who are terrified of their children's teacher. Yes, it's a revisitation to their own school trauma. So that was commendable of you. And then, secondly, you are refusing to bite the bait that all of culture does, which is that education is so important and you have to get into an Ivy League school when you grow up and you have to follow this linear path. So you've broken that for yourself. But let me ask you about, how do you deal with the comparison culture of, oh, your best friend's kid is doing this, and oh my goodness, your cousin's nephew or whatever is doing that? How do you combat that competition culture, that comparison culture, and not succumb to it? What do you tell yourself to allow yourself to create an idiosyncratic path for your children?
An idiosyncratic path. I love that. So I'll be perfectly honest, that hasn't come up a lot for me. And I think here's why. I'm really particular about who I spend time with. And I'm really particular about the kind of conversations that I will participate in. And I don't have any close friends of mine where that has come up.
I love that. So first, I'm really curious, how do you create such good boundaries? I'm sure at some point you had toxic people around you and you weeded them out? Or is it that you've never?
Yes. I mean, of course, right? First of all, I have a lot of friends and they're great. And one of my number one priorities is cultivating relationships with families where I really love the way they parent because it means our kids play really well together. And so I have a few of those relationships where it's just like we have so much aligned in terms of our parenting that I feel really great about sending my kids over there, and we do a lot of like sleepover, swapping, hanging out, pizza nights, like all of that. We kind of have this village. If my girls want to like have play dates with people who aren't really in that circle as they get older, this will be, of course, I'll have to completely change the way I do things. But I just like say no. Like I just am like, oh no, we can't or whatever. And it hasn't come up a lot since my girls are young. But yeah, if there's like a toxic conversation going on at the pickup line or the drop off, gathering or this party or that party, I just sort of like will go off to the side and like do my own thing. I don't really feel like a lot of pressure to like become friends with all the other moms.
Yeah. So there isn't that pull in you to be part of the crowd and to belong to the popular group. And you've created that boundary for yourself. Of course, it won't last as your kids now, will choose their own friends. But right now, while you have control, you've created some sanctum, this beautiful kind of village where there's a similar consciousness. And I think that's important for our listeners to really take in. What you're really speaking to is that you have the power, especially when your children are young, to pick and choose how you spend time, with whom you spend time, and really create that sanctity around your parenting. Many times as parents, we think we have no choice. Oh, this is just the way the education system is. This is just the way things are. But within seemingly lack of choice, there is choice, right? And we have to just find that little thread of choice. Not everyone can send their kids to private school, but yet you can go and appeal to the teacher. You can advocate for your kid. You can create boundaries. You can pick and choose your friends. And most importantly, you can choose to react to the cultural pressures in your own unique way, which is what you've done. So, Kate, where did you find yourself slipping the most as a parent in terms of repeating an emotional pattern from childhood?
Oh, I love that question. Where have I found myself slipping the most in terms of repeating an emotional pattern from childhood? Okay, so it's definitely around control and control regarding food and control regarding screen time.
Mm-hmm.
So I can really get in my loop around hypervigilance, around like thinking my kids are somehow going to be complete screen addicts and like I'm going to lose them forever. I can
Right.
really go there. And that wasn't like as much of a thing in my childhood, obviously, because I was raised in the 80s. However, my dad had a real thing about TV and like vilifying television. And my mom was really controlling about food. And so I can see that in myself. And I've just been practicing like when we go out for breakfast on a weekend or whatever, and my girls are like, can I have this, that, or the other thing, like the chocolate croissant and the whatever? I mean, I had always just been like, no, I mean, they have allergies, the whole thing. But I'm just like, yeah, whatever your body feels like eating is great. So that's been super interesting to just like
Yeah.
regulate myself through the fear of like, oh my God, they're eating gluten and whatever. And then around screens, just noticing what comes up for me. I will say my kids don't have their own devices. I'm delaying that as long as humanly possible. They don't watch TV during the week. So this is like minor, but I can feel like I'm a bad mom if I'm letting them be on devices for too long, as though like I'm being lazy or taking the quote unquote easy way out. So those things come up for me.
Yeah, well, I can't even find any fault in that because the food we eat is mostly quite horrible and screens are really damaging. So I think if these are your two worst qualities, Kate, you're doing amazing. Okay. I don't hear any childhood baggage. I think you're empowering yourselves to really make conscious choices given the milieu we live in. And So none of that reeks of real control. I mean, I think you're right to be nervous about these things. So, I know you've done a lot of work on yourself. I know that none of this has just come to you easily. What kind of work have you done on yourself, and how do you keep at it? Because I know this is something you cultivate with intentionality. Kate wasn't just so lucky to be such a wholesome human being, which you are, but you've worked on it. How much energy you put into this? Because the package is amazing, but people don't realize the work that goes into it.
Yeah. I mean, what do I not do? Right. Like I started going to personal development workshops when I was in high school, whether it was, one of my most favorite ones was proprioceptive writing. It's from a book called Writing the Mind Alive. Like I started doing proprioceptive writing in college when I was depressed and I just was like, I'm struggling. Like I need something. So I took myself to this weekend workshop with a bunch of 40 and 50 and 60-year-olds.
Yeah.
Just like, I have a coach that I work with once a month, and I have been working with her since 2016. She does a combination of like, internal family systems work and somatic work and nervous system repatterning. And then sometimes we just like talk about marketing. So we really, I was like, it's
Yeah.
across the board. My husband and I have a couples therapist who specializes in internal family systems. And we see him like for touch ups here and there. I do my own nervous system tools every day to regulate myself when I'm up at the edge of my capacity around receiving and being able to stay present and fully here and fully alive.
Yeah.
And I'm not a daily meditator, I will be perfectly honest, but I do meditate and I often meditate in the sauna, which
Yeah.
is like my favorite because I feel like I'm just like in there burning off
Right.
stuff.
Right.
And I know it sounds really simple, but I just really practice sitting with the discomfort of being with myself
Yeah.
and feeling how uncomfortable that is. And then just staying a little longer until eventually I actually find that it's blissful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I see in your journey is so much connection with community. I think you've surrounded yourself by women, especially who are into self growth, into helping each other and staying alive to your passion. You're always activating your curiosity and creativity in service. And people underestimate how much of mental health that brings about. And you dance and you move, and this is how we build a life, right? People think that life just comes, or good luck just comes, but it's not true. There's so much behind the scenes, and you're just such an exemplary symbol of that, of doing the work on a daily basis and managing it all. And my last question to you is, I know you and your partner are on the same page for the most part. How have you managed to cultivate that? Because many people struggle with one being on a super conscious path and the other not. So just a few hints or tidbits on that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I will be perfectly honest, like finding a man who was committed to his own personal development was really top of my list. So I chose someone who already was like reading books on meditation and doing personal development work. I would have just been super unavailable for someone who wasn't on that path. That being said, sometimes he's working on stuff that he like needs to remind me, and sometimes and so we do have a practice. Well, first of all, we have our therapist, which is really helpful. And then second of all, we do have a practice of like having very loving come to Jesus talks with each other, where it's not from a place of like you're doing anything wrong, but we'll hold up the mirror for each other in terms of like, hey, babe, like I actually know that your truest self is different than what you're doing here right now. And so I just like want to remind you of the brilliant king you are. And I'm just like available for that person to come forward at any time.
And when that king isn't coming forth, what's your energy like?
I mean, gosh, we've been through it. There was a time, 2021, 2022, like I was resentful. I was angry. I had so much pent up anger, and God bless Mike. I just would sometimes need to look at him and scream and yell. And sometimes even he would hand me a pillow and be like, bring it. and I would just wail on him with a pillow. And he just would be like, great, what else you got? And that was amazing. And that speaks to who he is and the work
Yes.
that he's done on himself to not need to defend or to
Mm,
just be a container of like, great, bring your emotional chaos. I can handle you. And
yeah.
that's one of my favorite things about him is that he can really handle me
Yeah.
and I'm a lot.
No, you're a lot of amazing. Well, Kate, thank you for this honest conversation. We've touched on so many things, going through adversity, finding the discipline to live an intentional life, being really honest and raw, looking at the imperfections as invitations. And listeners can hear in your voice and your messaging that there is no aspiration greater than authenticity and just showing up in the moment and trying things out. Like now you're moving again and you're going to create a whole new life in Nashville. And
It's really because I'm like, no one ever was like, oh, Miami's such a great place to raise kids. Like, I want them to have an environment that's like a little more wholesome.
yeah, yeah. And maybe when you go there, you'll change your mind about that.
100%. You never know.
And your life is this adventure and you're constantly recreating yourself out of the adversity you actually experience. I mean, you're teaching financial autonomy and sovereignty to hundreds of women. People should check out your website and your courses, your amazing courses, but you actually created that out of your own greatest pain. And that's what we all do, right? Doing less has been your greatest awakener. You need to do less and you teach that to others. You arrived at financial sovereignty and found that place within yourself to be totally in alignment. And now you teach others. And that's what makes you such a great teacher because you use your pain as the portal for others' awakening. So, Kate, thank you so much. I encourage all of you to take Kate's courses. She's a brilliant master at what she does. And thank you for being here with us, Kate.
Thank you, Shefali.
I'm sure all of you listening got so much out of this conversation between two women who are trying to do it all, but are not afraid to show up vulnerable, imperfect, and yet on the path towards growth and evolution. I got so inspired listening to my friend Kate. I'm sure you did too. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you tune in to the next episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. Parenting and You with Dr. Shefali is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional medical, psychological, psychotherapeutic, coaching, healthcare, or other qualified professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment.